Good afternoon, everyone. I call this regularly scheduled meeting of the Ways and Means Committee to order. I'm the chair of the committee, Council Member Abdi Warsame, and we're joined by Council Members Cunningham, Johnson, Palmisano, and Vice President Jenkins. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum and are able to take consideration of the city business today. First, what we're going to do, we have 26 items on the agenda. We have one public hearing and 25 consent items. And what we will do is take care of the consent items. I will read out the consent items, and they are as follows. The first consent item is a grant from the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals for an upgraded sanitation system at Minneapolis Animal Care and Control. The second item is a confidentiality and non-disclosure agreement with the Berkeley Risk Administrators Company, LLC, for protection of employee medical information. The next item is a bid for the Minneapolis Convention Center for expansion, restroom remodel project. The next item is authorizing participation in the Minnesota Municipal Money Market Fund, 4M, for the investment of city funds. The next item on the agenda is a rollover of 2017 funds to the 2018 general appropriation. The following item is selling fixed rate bonds to refund the remaining portion of the Target Center renovation project loan. The next item is a best value contracting for unitized facade for consolidated office building project. Item number 9 on the agenda is a contract with KCI Conservation and Midwest Art Conservation Center for the pool of qualified art conservators. The next item is an agreement with the Primary School of Behavioral Art, LLC, for Creative City Challenge Temporary Public Art Commission. Item number 11 is a bid for official advertising. Item number 12 is a 2018 Local Board of Appeal and Equalization. And item number 13 is the 2018 Local Board of Appeal and Equalization appointments, appointing the following members for the city's 2018 Board of Appeal and Equalization, appointing Tad Merinack, Sandy Losha, Patricia Werner, Earl Netwell, and Jeff Larson. Item number 14 is a contract with the University of Minnesota for Minneapolis Department bomb detection at TCF Stadium for football, soccer, and homecoming events. And item number 15 is a contract amendment with Minnesota Homeland Security and Emergency Management for bomb disposal units. Item number 16 is a contract with various organizations for the provision of services for victims of domestic violence. Item number 17 is a collective bargaining agreement with the Minneapolis Building and Construction Trades Council, AFL-CIO, Trades Journeyman Unit, May 1st, 2017 through April 30th, 2019. Item number 18 is a grant from the Hennepin County, for the Health Mentor Model Program. Item number 19 is an amendment to appropriation for grants from the National Marrow Donor Program. Item number 20 is an agreement with the Minnesota Campus Compact for a Vista Volunteer. Item number 21 is a non-disclosure agreement with Xcel Energy. Item number 22 is a bid for Fridley Campus sanitary sewer improvements. Item number 23 is a mid-city industrial street reconstruction project approval, assessment, and areaway abandonment. Item number 24 is a Brooklyn Boulevard reconstruction project, cooperative agreement with the City of Brooklyn Center. Item number 25 is a Plymouth Avenue North Street resurfacing project, approval and assessment. And item number 26 is the Nokomis Area Residential Street Resurfacing Project, approval and assessment. Okay, and I will move these items for approval. Any discussions from my colleagues? Any discussions? Okay. Seeing none, all in approval of the consent agenda, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. These items are approved. And now we're going to go back to our first item on the agenda, which is our public hearing, which today will be considering 2 resolutions regarding the Chapter 475 5-year capital improvement plan for the Eastside Storage and Maintenance Facility City Hall renovations, and the new office building or consolidated building, public service center, and the issuance of bonds to finance these projects. We have before us CFO, Mr. Mark Ruff. Please go ahead and give us a brief overview of the issues at hand. Welcome.
Chair Warsami, members of the Ways and Means Committee, I'm Mark Ruff. I'm going to quickly walk through a PowerPoint. Be happy to answer any questions as we go through the presentation or at the end as well. As the chair mentioned, we have two actions following the public hearing, and those are both to adopt a capital improvement plan that's specific to financing, as well as awarding a bond sale. But I should mention that this is all in preparation for subsequent construction bids that will be considered later this year. And really this discussion today and the actions today are to allow the City Council then to award those bids and understand where the financing is going to come from to pay for those bids. Generally, as an overview of debt for the city, you may be familiar with the fact that the city issues debt under its charter. The difficulty we have is that the charter limits per project bonds to $15 million. I'm told that part of the folklore, and I haven't gone back to research originally, that this $15 million cap was set sometime in the 1970s, and it was done at the time there was the first dome stadium that was actually proposed in the city, and this was a way of limiting the city's participation in a dome stadium for financing. So that dollar amount, and others can tell you some of the history there, but I'm told it was a rather significant change in the council that occurred at this time as well, and so it was we go through these decision points in cities all along the way, but this is one where there was no inflation assigned to this, and so we've been able to live within that cap, primarily because we find other authorities to issue debt. So, for example, we're undertaking a $60 million renovation of the Fridley water treatment plant. Well, that's not being issued with bonds according to our charter. We're using state statutes to authorize the bonds. In that particular case, the state statute we're using or in that particular case, either we have special legislation or we have a state statute that allows us to issue debt. And in that case, we have both of those options. For this particular set of projects, being that they're primarily public works and public safety oriented, we are able to use a different statute, and that's Chapter 475.521, that allows us to pay for either portions of buildings or all of buildings that are associated with these public safety and public works needs, as well as City Hall. Now, one of the subtleties here in this discussion is the new consolidated office building, which we also refer to as the new public service center, is not a City Hall. Our City Hall resides in this building, and so we can't use this authority to pay for all of that new building as well. But we can combine these statutory authorities, and that's what we anticipate doing with the consolidated office building is coming together with 2 or 3 different statutory authorities. The one that we're just dealing with today is the Chapter 475. There are 8 considerations that we'll walk through that the council and this committee will receive feedback on in terms of what specific findings are required under the resolution and the statute. There is this public hearing, and then there is an allowance for 30 days that if people don't like this particular way of financing, they can assemble a petition. I think it's 5% of the, that's right, Julie Eddington from Kennedy and Graven, our bond attorney, is here, is 5% of the votes cast in the last election. So I think we had something over 100,000 votes in the last election, so 5,000 people. Within 30 days, if that's brought to the council, then we need to put it on the ballot. This is not, we refer to this as the capital improvement plan process, but it's really just for financing. It's not the same as what the CLIC committee goes through that this council considers as a part of the budget. This is a specific capital improvement plan just for bond financing. The two projects in more detail, and we have staff here who certainly can outline if you have questions about these projects, but I think we've talked about them a few times beforehand and certainly several times over the last couple of years. The first is the East Side Storage and Maintenance Facility, and it's up at 27th and University. It is replacing 2 outdated facilities, 2710 Pacific and 1809 Washington Street. So one in North Minneapolis, one in Northeast Minneapolis. Both of those buildings were originally built in the 1940s. So they've obviously served the purpose as well for our solid waste as well as our transportation maintenance repair needs. Part of the justification for this particular facility is being able to combine those two storage and maintenance facilities into one, so that hopefully over the long term we see some efficiencies garnered by the fact that we have large vehicles all in one place where they can be attended to by the similar staff. And there is also has been some discussion in the past, and maybe sometime in the future, the ability to incorporate parkboard large vehicles into some of components of this facility as well. The other facilities we're talking about are the renovations to this building, which would be associated with people moving in and out with the construction of a new public service center, or what we refer to as the consolidated office building. So looking at east side first, we'll focus on that. This is an architectural rendering. We are actually at 90%, or I think probably close to 100% now, Bob, in terms of construction drawings. And so this project has been undertaken over the last couple of years. This is the office portion. So if you're on University looking south, you can see downtown off in the distance. And then on the east side of University, just south of where that bridge comes down, is where this facility would be. This is what I would call the prettiest side of the building. It is the part where you will see a fair amount of landscaping. There will be public art incorporated as well. And then this is the office component. Behind that, you can see some of the indoor maintenance facilities, and there's parking associated with this as well. This is just a site plan. Again, the upper left corner is that area that we were looking at before, and that's the office component. And you can see on the right-hand side is a fair amount of outdoor parking that will be associated with these larger vehicles. I know we are also considering CNG, so a different form of powering our solid waste vehicles using natural gas as one of the alternatives that's been evaluated with this. So it's a good opportunity to review a variety of not just facility needs, but also operational needs for these departments. And again, we have staff with their questions to answer those particular issues. This facility is right now estimated to be less than $47 million. I think we expect right now between about $40 and $45 million is the exact cost. This project will be bid in the next couple of months, and we have alternates. And depending on the savings and the amount, we will come forward with those bids to the council in 2018. About $15 million is tax supported. The taxes to support this bond issue were approved in the last budget cycle. So a part of our bond redemption levy, the part of the levy that we pay for regular bond issues, was incorporated this particular project when the budget was adopted in 2017. And then we'll have the majority of the building that will be supported by solid waste revenues. That has been a part of their 5-year plan and their planned increases in the solid waste and recycling budget as well. There's a document that was in the packets. It outlines all of the findings that are required, but generally I will just quickly go over the fact that we have looked at the condition of the infrastructure. There were condition reports. It wasn't just that these facilities were built in the 1940s. They've aged. They're in areas that don't support these kinds of facilities, in particular over 27th and Pacific. Part of that facility is in the floodplain. Just the circulation, not just the construction, but the circulation of those facilities really don't meet today's demands whatsoever for what would be considered an efficient project and an efficient building for the kind of services that are being delivered, which are obviously very different than they were 70 years ago. Certainly the demand and the costs of the improvements are outlined already, but the demand for solid waste and recycling, we've been asking more and more of our solid waste and recycling folks as we've added organics. So that entire operation has changed and will continue to change over the next few years. There is a provision asking about overlapping debt. There is, that's, I think, just trying to understand how much the school district has in debt, how much the county has in debt, and by the city adding a lot more debt, is that going to somehow be problematic? And so we have included some numbers on that. At this stage, we don't see debt as a problem for any of the jurisdictions, but certainly happy to talk about that some more as well. And then they're asking also about alternatives. So, and I think this is just the statute's way of saying, have you thought, city, about, is there a different way of doing business? So, for example, in solid waste, is there, should we be combining with the county? Should we be asking ourselves larger questions before we commit to a building? And I think it's interesting that this site at 27th and University actually originally started out as a facility that was going to be a household hazardous waste facility combined with the county. And that facility actually did not materialize. And so the city ended up buying this particular large piece of property, and then more recently has assembled 8 homes that have also been purchased along University. But there was an exploration of that particular kind of combined effort, and it just did not materialize. Certainly Councilmember Reich, being that this is in his ward, can give you more history than I have in terms of the evolution of that. But as I mentioned earlier, we also have been talking with the park board and really went into great detail of trying to find a way operationally. Could we make this facility work for everyone? The additional amount of land that would have been necessary, we potentially could have added to this particular project, but the park board themselves pulled out of the process about a year ago. And so we're on our way to just our own facility. But as I mentioned earlier, there could be ways for them to utilize this facility. They may not store their vehicles there, at least to have them fixed, washed, other kinds of opportunities for combined facilities. For I think in this particular area, and especially given the ward council member is also the chair of TPW, have been a great amount of exploration in terms of uses of this particular facility. We do have a good sense of what the operating costs are, and again, part of the efficiencies of the fact that this is going to be a LEED Gold certified facility as well. So even larger public works buildings, as was the case in Hiawatha facility, can be very energy efficient. We do anticipate some savings associated with that as well. So that's the 27th and University project, the City Hall renovations and the new office building. Just a quick review in terms of the existing conditions. 40% of this building is under the county's control. We're out of space currently, and we are spread out in a variety of facilities, including the Public Service Center, of which there's been no investment since 1999. The council is familiar with some of this history. We also rent in 4 other buildings. So here you can see the different facilities that the city has downtown, all of which are in need of either replacement or some kind of renovation. The green being the leased buildings. We just started to lease another building, the Grain Exchange building across from the Flower Exchange. It was also pointed out to me that the fire station's in the wrong place on this map. It should be a block east, so I apologize for that. But we are also hopeful that fire station number 1 will be replaced over the next couple of years on that as a part of a larger redevelopment that would occur on the Allied parking surface parking lot area where it currently resides. But really our objective is to really consolidate then all of the office workers for the city within City Hall and this consolidated office building or new public service center. The departments that will be moving into the new consolidated office building are listed here. So a fair amount of our police department revolving around investigations. So that's also a public service in the sense of people coming in who are either witnesses or victims of a crime, meeting with the police department. Happens a fair amount in this building as well as will in the new building. CPED is also a major tenant in this new building and obviously has a lot of interaction on a number of levels, from business licensing up to small business help, as well as permits and building permits and advice that comes from the building department, Steve DePore's area. Health Department and Regulatory Services will also be located in this building, as well as parts of Finance and Property Services, such as utility billing and our area of procurement that takes bids. So again, the goal here is to provide much more accessible and easy to understand services for those people coming in who either are not regular visitors to the city or who may be regular visitors to the city but can actually minimize the number of trips that they have to take among the different departments. Here specifically is listing who's coming into City Hall and who's moving out of City Hall. So it's not just about building a new building, it's also about the need to update this building for the workers who are coming in. And so a significant number of departments, including Human Resources, part of our department, Finance and Property Services, and Risk Management area. Our assessor will be moving in. Neighborhood and Community Relations, who do most of their work out in the neighborhoods, but need to have a home base, and that would be located in this building, as well as the Youth Coordinating Board. So how do we pay for all of these renovations and the new construction? Well, there are several sources. The first of all is that we're not going to need new property taxes to pay for the debt associated with this. We have an existing debt levy, $10.4 million, that's being used to pay for the city's share of the library bonds. So even though the county operates the libraries, we are continuing to levy property taxes to pay the debt service associated with the construction of not just the new downtown library, but the neighborhood libraries that were approved as well at the same time. We also will have savings on the operating costs associated with our existing leases and old efficient buildings that we have. We expect that to be between $500,000 and $1 million per year. And then we also have departments who are going to be moving into this new facility as well as into City Hall, who are supported by non-property tax revenues. For example, utility billing, as I mentioned, is supported by sewer, water, stormwater fees because they send out the billing just for those particular enterprise funds, as well as some of the CPED and health fee-supported departments as well. The debt that's being authorized is the share of these facilities that are associated with City Hall renovations, as well as the public safety and public works portions, which we estimate to be at $108 million at the high end. In the document, we mentioned that the total project cost over 5 years, because this does actually look over 5 years, is expected to be potentially over $200 million, but this debt would just be paid for a portion of that. And there's also not just the department working space and infrastructure of City Hall itself that is needed to be replaced. I think in terms of these findings, again, we feel like there's adequate basis in the document as well as the other information that's been presented to the council over the last 4 years to support all of these findings, but certainly would be happy to walk through those in detail if the committee wishes to at this point in time. Just a brief on the new office building. It is expected to be 11 stories. The 11th story is a mechanical floor, so it's really going to be 10 occupied floors. We have a floor and a half that's being built for the future, so those would not be actually built out. It's what's called shelled, meaning the mechanicals will be in there, the basic ability to sometime in the future occupy that space. But we are looking at about 382,000 square feet. That includes one underground level, which will not have parking, but will have storage, as well as a bicycle facility for city employees. So here again is a summary of the benefits of the renovations of the City Hall, as well as the new building. And I think really this reducing our footprint is an important one. The City Hall, or the City of Lakes building, the Public Service Center will be sold so that there will be a new construction and new tax revenues associated with that. We will minimize, hopefully, the confusion for people who visit or do business with the city, as well as just the proximity of being able to treat the City Hall and the new consolidated office building as almost like one building, so even people who are residing in one or other building can use the facilities in the other building. As it is important to mention that this will not affect the city council offices, it will not affect the mayor's offices. I won't be moving, the police chief won't be moving, the fire chief won't be moving. Those very core functions will be staying within City Hall. So this is just a review of actions, and then to let you know that we do anticipate that demolition will be starting on June 18th. So with that, Mr. Chair, happy to answer any questions, or certainly if there's any public comments, we could take that and then respond accordingly afterwards.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ruff. I will now open the public hearing. Is there anyone here wishing to speak to the topic today? Anyone? Anyone from the public? Anyone? Okay, seeing no person wishing to speak, I will close the public hearing and move this item for approval. Any discussion from my colleagues? Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Rosami. Mr. Ruff, I'm curious about the new consolidated office building. Is there any space in that plan for community meeting space or spaces where community can gather outside of just the public spaces?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Jenkins, yes, there is a conference center on the first floor that's being planned. It's if it were all opened up into one large room, which it will have the potential for, it'll be up to 150 people to meet. It can be broken into smaller areas as well. One of the things that we have been doing as staff is had a couple of neighborhood meetings and been meeting with those downtown associations as well as Elliott Park neighborhood as to what get their input on what kind of facilities that should include. But it would be our expectations that that would be open after business hours for any kind of public use. And it's our anticipation that if there is a cost, it would be very nominal cost for that. So we do see that as a benefit as well for the public. So thank you for bringing that up.
And then just as a follow-up, I know that there's been a lot of conversation or desire for public use of the bike facilities. Has that conversation progressed, or have you had more dialogue around that?
Chair Orsami, Councilmember Jenkins, there is more dialogue on it. I think they refer to them as bike centers, I think, where people who are not employees could come and store their bikes. I think the question would be, is there going to be enough space in the basement for that kind of facility? I think the other is just a larger policy issue for the council to address, which is at least what our Public Works Department has said is the current emphasis of the city is to get employers to put bike storage facilities and locker rooms in individual buildings, so people can just have their bike in their own building. But we haven't closed the door on that option, and I've talked to the Public Works Director, Robin Hutchinson. She's committed as a part of this evaluation process to look and see whether it could be feasible. Likely it would need to be run by a third party. And so there would be, because it's a service, it would cost, at least the research that I've done around the country, people who have these bike services, they usually cost somewhere between $40 and $50, $60 a month. And so part of this is also a business evaluation, which is, does that pay for the costs of the facility as well as a third party running it? And I know the closest thing that we have in the Twin Cities to something like that I'm aware of is the Free Will Bike facility down on Midtown Greenway. I know that facility was the beneficiary of several grants originally. So that's a question too, as to whether we could emulate that particular business plan or not. But it's something that I would say is being investigated. I would also just caution to say it's probably not likely at this stage, just given my gut feeling about it. But I think there is a need there. We recognize the need, and we'll certainly, if it doesn't work in this building, we'll come back with a further discussion about whether the city should be looking at that kind of facility long term. But we haven't closed the door on it by any means.
Okay, very good. And then I guess just one final comment or question. Are you willing to speak, or are you prepared at this moment to speak about the public art opportunities that may be in that facility?
So, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Jenkins, Mary Altman is here. I think she's much better equipped than I am to speak about public art. So I certainly ask Mary to address that.
Mr. Chair, Council Vice President Andrea Jenkins, we are in the process of defining the whole public art plan for the building. We are in the first phase. The first phase involves an artist working with the design team to identify what the public art opportunities are, the locations, the media, also kind of the range of artists that could be engaged. One of the super cool things about the building is we hardly ever have art indoors. And so we have the opportunity to engage artists here who don't build structures that can withstand cars hitting them and salt being dumped on them and those kinds of things. And so it's a really great opportunity in that way too. The overall goals for the public art program are similar to the goals of the building. We're looking at being a very welcoming and inviting place, making sure that the diverse cultures of the city are represented, that the art supports the employees and the innovation in city government. So our plan is probably by the end of the spring, we will have identified a draft set of possible locations for art. And then we have gone through one artist selection process. An artist from Atlanta, Tristan Al-Haddad, is working with the design team currently to identify these locations. But then once Tristan and the design team identify them, then we will probably do multiple subsequent calls depending on what the opportunities are. We expect there will be both two-dimensional opportunities and three-dimensional opportunities, and we want opportunities that have a range of budget sizes, so we can work with both emerging artists and also create opportunities for artists who've been in our community for a long time.
Thank you. So this actually provides a unique opportunity for artists who may not be public artists to now have an opportunity to produce and present artwork within city facilities. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, Council Vice President Jenkins, yes, that's true. For example, we rarely commission paintings. Painting could be a media that we would commission in several locations in the building.
Wow, thank you. I'm very much looking forward to those opportunities.
Thank you very much, Councilman Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question is for Mr. Ruff. I read through the 5-year capital improvement plan based on the Chapter 475, and on page 9 of it, there is a table that it says that is information relating to the outstanding overlapping general obligation indebtedness of the city as of the end of 2016. I have 2 questions. The first question would be, what is projected to be the final amount of outstanding overlapping general obligation indebtedness, and then what is considered fiscally sound?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Cunningham, first of all, congratulations on making it all the way through that document. I'm impressed that you read it and that you picked out this table. I think being fiscally sound is oftentimes probably more reflected by bond ratings than necessarily an absolute debt amount. I would say that for the city itself, there has been a continual decline in debt. So we were over $1.1 billion in debt several years ago, and I think the low point was something below $700 million. I would expect that with these projects that are mentioned here, as well as our 20-year streets and parks program, we will be increasing debt, but we hope not to get certainly up to those levels of the 1.1 billion. We would like to see these be more manageable debt amounts. And I would also say that your question is astute from the standpoint that to me, it's less about how much debt you have and how you pay for it. So for example, if we're adding a bunch of debt for our water facility, but it's going to be debt that's affordable. We're borrowing money from the state of Minnesota through the Public Facilities Authority loan program that will probably be debt at 1.5% or 1.75% interest rates. That's very affordable as well, and we're paying for it with water revenues. Whereas if we were paying for that with taxes, that would be a whole different story, right? So we have to know then where the debt's coming from. In terms of the county itself, the county will be adding debt, assuming that some of these light rail projects come online and they have a new tax levy new sales tax that was associated with that will be adding some debt. The school district, I expect, will be fairly level as well. But it's actually one of the things that I'm very happy about, that the school CFO, the county CFO, and I meet once a month, and we talk about these things, about who's issuing bonds, what we're hearing from rating agencies. And so the fact that there's a coordinated effort, I think, is what this document's trying to get at, is do you talk to each other? And I assume that's where your question's coming from as well. And I would just say that generally, because the county carries a AAA rating from Standard & Poor's, we carry a AAA rating from Standard & Poor's. It's the highest possible bond rating. I know the school district has seen some trouble with their bond rating, but I think that has more to do with the fact that they haven't had a balanced budget over a period of time than necessarily the amount of debt. So I think that having some stability in what they're looking at for a little more fiscal stability will be a good thing as well. So I appreciate the question, appreciate you reading all the way through the document and asking us those things.
All right.
I take my nerdery very seriously. Thank you for that, and I would love to follow up to be able to dig more into this table and bonds to be able to just have a richer understanding of how it all works. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other questions, Councilman? All right. Thank you. Seeing none, all in approval say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The item is approved. And having concluded the business on our agenda for today, we are adjourned. Thank you.